In this video, we're going to be talking about positioning for advanced anglers. This is a topic that a lot of people overlook, and it actually is a big deal. Obviously, it's not as important as finding the fish, but there's nothing worse than putting your time in, learning fish behavior, putting yourself in the right area, and then just positioning the wrong way to just totally wreck your chances of catching many, or if not any, fish. And so we're going to start with shallow flats. Then we're going to talk about dock fishing, which is extremely effective for advanced anglers. Then we're going to go into rivers and creeks, and then finally we'll end up with the marshes. And we're going to keep this quick, but just overall we know that we want to position ourselves ideally down current from our target and upwind from the target. That way we're casting with the wind to get maximum casting distance, and then we're retrieving our lures back with the current flow to make sure that we're bringing our lure back in the same direction that the fish are expecting their next meal to come from. Obviously, the wind and the current aren't always positioned in that exact way, so we're going to go over some examples. And just really the key goal here is just to make sure that we're always putting the elements in our favor as much as possible. And most importantly is that we're not putting the elements directly against us. So let's look at this first spot. This is a spot that can be fished by wade fishermen, kayakers, boaters. It doesn't matter how you're fishing, the same principles apply. And so for this example, let's just assume there's an outgoing current flow where the current is going this way from right to left. And then over here on this side, it's going from right to left. We want to fish this shoreline. So if there's no wind at all and we want to fish this shoreline right here, we would want to start down at the bottom side, right? We're down current and we're casting up current, retrieving back. That's going to help our odds be better on catching more fish. We're going to be casting farther, and it's just going to be easier to fish in general. But what if we have a strong wind coming with the current flow? What do we do in this situation? So in general, when fishing shallow flats like this, particularly grass flats, the current's really not very strong. If we had a strong outgoing current, it would be going pretty fast down over here. It would also be going pretty fast out this way, but up on the shallows, the current in shallow zones like this often just gets deadened to the point where it's not going to be super fast. The fish aren't always going to be positioned the same way. And up on the shallows, it is extremely important to be able to cast far. So in general, if I have the current and the wind going the same direction on a shallow grass flat, I prioritize the wind more than anything else. So if I was waiting and I wanted to fish this shoreline, I would either hike up along and fish here, or I would try to punch through right here and wade up around, and then that way again I can start casting with the wind and cover this shoreline as effectively as possible. Obviously, if I was on a boat or a kayak, I would just start up this way and let the wind just drift me down as quietly as possible, and that way I can cover this area as quietly and effectively as possible. So now let's talk about docks. This is one of my favorite things to do if the bite's slow. Dock fishing is a type of fishing that there's always going to be fish there, number one, and the fish are usually going to be more comfortable, number two, because they're surrounded by a bunch of pilings. And so even on slow days when there's just not a lot of activity, this is a great way to go out and catch a bunch of good fish. A lot of my biggest fish on lures also have been caught around docks for the same principle, right? These fish are there, they're comfortable, and they're not used to getting targeted because not many people can effectively fish docks. This requires very good casting. For anybody who can cast well, this is a great type of fishing to do. And then especially again for those of us like me who live in high populated areas, dock fishing can oftentimes be the best for consistently catching very good fish. So when fishing docks, as far as positioning goes, very important to start down current, and we're going to start with lures. So we'll just talk about lures. So I like to just start on the very first dock down current. That way I can start skipping my lure up underneath the dock and then retrieving it back with the current flow. That's going to be the direction that the fish are expecting the next meal, and that way we can again just get down current from the dock. We're not getting pushed into it. We can sit there and kind of take our time and just cover the different depth zones so that we can make sure to know exactly what depth that most of the fish are holding. And once you find that depth, you can apply it to all the other docks and just again catch as many fish as possible in the shortest amount of time. So after doing the shallow part, obviously bounce lures along the outside, and then just basically keep doing that down the dock line. So if the current's going too fast to do this is when you really need a trolling motor to work into the current flow. If the current's too strong to work into the current flow as effectively, that's when it's usually best to just push out and find a nearby cove or just a nearby shoreline that has a little bit less water flow. So when the water's moving really fast on docks like this, I've actually fished this exact area. When the water's going too fast to fish this section, I'll literally just go right around. This little cove just doesn't have the water flow to really have that be a factor. And so at the high current periods, I'll just fish a little nearby cove. And then once we get closer to the turn of the tides, then I'll shift back out into the main channels where there's usually going to be more fish. The window to fish these docks are just a little bit smaller, so again, that high current zone, it's just not worth struggling and not being able to control your lure. You're going to get snagged on the pilings, and you're just not going to be able to just have as much fun on the water. So for the areas like this, target them near the turns of the tides. And if you're going to be using live bait, the opposite is true. So if live bait, say, wanted to fish this dock, we'd want to position right where this cross is so that we can drift our baits back with the current flow. That way, we're not casting our lures. We're not having to skip our lures like a live bait up on our docks that'll wear them out. They're going to die quickly. Instead, go up current, anchor down, and then let the baits just drift back in the current flow. And ideally, basically pin them on the bottom right next to the pilings. That's a great way to catch a bunch of fish. The only con is just that once you do hook up, you're going to have to fight the fish against the current. So you'll definitely need to have a little bit stronger gear for that to happen. And so next, let's talk about some rivers and creeks. And really the same premise holds true that we've been talking about. You just want to make sure to not fight against whatever the strongest element is. And so in this case, we'll just say that the current and the wind are both going down the same direction, which is not good for lures. Instead of fighting the wind, if it's a strong wind, and getting away where we can favor the current, we'll just go at a cross current, right? Get at a cross current. That way you're basically casting across both. And then just as you retrieve your lure, it's just going to basically bounce back at a little bit of an angle, which is still fine, right? The fish are going to be positioned looking up. And so with a cross cast like this, we can still have our lure effectively coming towards the fish in the proper direction. And that way we don't have to cast directly into the wind. We don't have to, again, put ourselves in a tough situation. And the same general principle holds true in the marshes. The cool thing about the marshes is that there's going to be so many turns, there's so many pockets of water that in many cases we can just situate ourselves where we can maximize the wind and the current. It just gets really tough when we have to go back into these really, really small little channels. That's when it gets tough. And again, sometimes you're going to have to punch into the wind. That's when it's good to just get comfortable with that low cast, a low line drive cast to get up underneath the wind, and maybe switch to a lure like a spoon, something that just penetrates the wind better than other lures. So that's it for the overview. A lot of this is common sense, but it is surprising how many anglers don't prioritize the factors appropriately, and they're fighting against the elements when they have the option to actually put the elements in their favor. So any questions at all, leave a comment down below. Also, if there's anything that I missed, love to hear that as well. So put a comment down below. I'll be happy to make any additional videos as needed. And just want to thank you so much for your time and watching. We'll see you on the next lesson.